top athletes are pretty expensive, and they're great as a positioning play, but they do not convert at all. Next big one for us, I don't know if it's really been announced yet, but will be next month, which is obviously, biggest retailer in the world.
Has that been a big kind of learning curve for everyone in terms of doubling down sachets, or what's your sort of learnings from that?
Well, last 12 weeks, as of about a month ago, we were the best selling hydration drink in GNC.
In a way, I think the beverage market is still very untapped. Everyone's trying to do it, but I think what makes you guys unique, and I've said this to you so many times, but
100%, and even working with you guys, really do see Kirsty as part of our team, really. Obviously, she's on your team, but
yeah. So for this year, what's kind of the goals for Cadence then? What are you trying to aim for? You can kind of split that between D2C and retail, I guess.
Yeah, so total growth, we're looking at 500% year on year, which is pretty big. Cans are not a D2C product.
Today I have Matty Martin on with us from Cadence, someone who I know very well. Matty, how's things?
Yeah, good. Been a busy week, a lot happening, which I'm sure we'll get into. But yeah, super good. Excited to be on.
100%. And listen, had to bring a little can just to
Oh,
drink it while we're on the show. But
mate, I've got an empty fridge.
obviously, we've been working together for quite a few months now,
Yeah.
so I know quite a bit about the brand. So I suppose, listen, Cadence has been everywhere. So kind of chat us through what's going on at the minute with the brand. I just seen you guys launched into Target and retail's going big. So what are you
Yeah.
guys kind of focusing on at the minute?
Yeah, so I guess the end goal focus is, legacy beverage brand. I think probably quite a few people look at us, look at our offering, and you know, obviously we do the electrolyte sachets, we do the gels, we do all these kind of D2C products, but really for us, the can in retail is that's the whale. We like to frame ourselves in a way as kind of this modern sports hydration, and when you look at kind of what exists in the market currently, especially over in the US, it's really dominated by Gatorade. So that's ultimately the space that we're coming for. We want to be number one in that world, and as much as we focus on the athlete and the goal oriented athlete, that's our core persona. The goal is really to have everyone drinking it. Whether it's your guy in the city who goes for lunch at Starbucks, picks up a Cadence, whether it's a girl heading home from Pilates, picks up a Cadence. Really, it's just whenever you want to perform. Really, Cadence should be the drink that you reach for. As you all know anyway, hydration really is at the core of kind of everything fundamental. So yeah, that's kind of the goal. A lot happening at the moment though. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been, you guys are everywhere, which is class to see. I'm a genuine fan of the brand. Like I've been drinking it since,
Yeah.
the brand's really come out. So it's interesting to actually see how you've evolved. So kind of start with that as well. Like,
Mhm.
you obviously had the smaller single, like more plain can you could call it, and then you've evolved into this new branding. So
Yeah.
what was kind of the decisions behind that? Like chat us through a bit about that
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously when it launched in April 2024. It had a super minimalist can, looked sick, looked super clean. The whole website was just as you'll know, just white. Wasn't really built for conversion at all, to be honest. But it was nice to look at, but yeah, it kind of matched that can, and everything that we did around those kind of early months really was kind of built around that minimalist. Wouldn't even call it really an ecosystem because it was just one product, but it kind of worked for D2C because ultimately you've got a PDP with the can on where you're obviously going into product description. You can break things down. You have the time and attention a little bit more on a website than you would on a shelf in retail. So yeah, as we started to roll out more products, obviously the sachets came first, then came the bars and the gels. We started to really look at hydration as this system. So that's why when you go on the site, you see the start hydration system, the ultimate hydration system, and the idea was that pretty much every other product on the market is essentially their version of our core sachet. So they'll have one product, multiple flavors. Every product will have the same formulation pretty much. And, typically as you look throughout the day, your hydration needs are very different throughout the day. Like what you'd have, just before you go to bed is likely very different from what you'd have when you wake up in the morning, which is likely different from what you'd want before you went and trained, for example. So that's where we built out this kind of core energy sleep as kind of the hydration system, if you will. So then we kind of went on to this second iteration of the can, second iteration of the sachets, which were kind of like almost trying to force things into that system a little bit. Like, let's make the can work within that system. And, if you look at the design of the second can, it was called Core 500. And the idea was we had, Core 500 can, Core 500 sachet. Then we had like the Race 500 sachet, Race can, and then the Sleep sachet as well. So it kind of worked in this like systematic way. It still looked great on site, but then as soon as we went into retail, that's what really changed things ultimately. I think Ross says that there's like, I think it's 0.5 seconds you've essentially got on shelf for someone to understand what your product is and what it does. And when you looked at that can and you saw Core 500, you really couldn't tell what the drink was. So yeah, we launched Vitamin Shop in GNC last year. And yeah, we quickly realised that we needed to change things. So got on with Matt, our designer, spent a lot of nights just like workshopping it essentially, just me, Ross, and Matt over Teams basically. I think he made about 1,000 iterations of the can before we came to the one that we landed on. You just hold it up a sec, Paddy, you'll be able to see. I mean, straight away,
Yeah,
the like flavor call out, big one.
yeah,
Hydration, super obvious. Zero sugar, super obvious. And then the USPs on there as well in terms
yeah.
of what it actually does. And obviously we've had some bigger retail launches more recently, like Target and Holland and Barrett over here in the UK. But the impact on the existing retailers we're in was pretty immediate, honestly. I think last 12 weeks as of about a month ago, we were the best selling hydration drink in GNC.
Unreal.
So yeah, it's really trying to make the can ultimately like the direct response ad version of packaging, I guess, as opposed to overly kind of premium minimalist, but doesn't actually tell you what it does. So
Yeah, I think what's really interesting though is the flavor as well. Do you know,
yeah,
like I've tasted them all, and I think the flavors even come on a long way. Like, do
yeah.
you think that's obviously we know the churn stats and we know the retention stats within all of that, but do you feel like that's had a massive part to play in the success as well?
Yeah, I mean, you look at kind of what's existing in the market, and like, you either have your Gatorades, which are filled with sugar, artificial colors, artificial flavors, like this neon green liquid, or you have kind of the traditional better for you options. Probably won't go into naming them, don't worry, just want to brand. But ultimately, like they all taste like an electrolyte drink, whereas I feel like with our flavors, we kind of say internally a little bit like taste like your favorite soda, and it kind of does really like
Yeah,
ultimately I feel like um we can take share from people. We can take share from brands who have customers that typically would drink a Coke or a Coke Zero, or
yeah.
you know what I mean, and ultimately get them on a better for you option.
Yeah, 100%. That's like literally why I drink them. I'm sitting at the office, coffee, and there's only so much coffee you can drink before
Yeah,
you kind of go schizophrenic to some extent. And I
yeah,
would be an avid caffeine drinker, but even just being able to grab this is, especially when you play sport or you want to look after yourself, it's unreal. Even just for the average person who works at a
yeah,
desk, they should
yeah,
be drinking it. But one thing I think that people forget in ecom is how difficult things like cans and liquids are to scale in
yeah.
D2C. So as much as we know, like what has that been a big kind of learning curve for everyone in terms of doubling down sachets, or what's your sort of
Yeah,
learnings from that?
yeah, definitely. I mean, really, a lot of the products that we have now, I mean, the sachets is a big one. Is like this is a D2C. Like cans are not a D2C product. Like I think the last time I bought a can online before I bought Cadence was when White Monster first came to the UK back in like 2012, 2013. I bought them off Amazon. And there's the big reason why is the shipping. Obviously, I mean, as you know, we're in the UK and the US, and like ultimately, like if someone in California, for example, orders a case of our cans, it can be paying, $15 for that case, um, which is wild and a pretty big commitment. And I think that's why as well it kind of became important for us to open up our online distributions, Amazon as well, to get that kind of catchment of people who aren't necessarily so bought into the brand that they're too asked about having a subscription and get the merch and be part of that kind of loyal group, but just want the product. Yeah, that became pretty important, but definitely. But I mean, to be fair, I do look at other brands in the space, like Breeze is a big one in the US. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure they hit like 50 mil in their second year just selling
Yeah,
cans.
something crazy.
Crazy. And
Yeah.
like they're like the only other brand that I look at which is like a D2C first beverage brand. And obviously they've killed it. They're in a highly regulated category as well, which obviously makes things harder. But the way I think about it, if it's been done before, it can be done again. So yeah.
Yeah, and you're going after, I think that's the biggest thing I've seen. You're going after all the biggest people in the space. It's kind of like in a way, I think the beverage market is still very untapped. Do you know, like
Yeah.
it's everyone's trying to do it. But I
Yeah.
think what makes you guys unique, and I've said this to you so many times, but when
Hmm.
I'm flying or when I go on a plane, I'm like, I need to grab something. I
Yeah.
would love to just be able to grab that beverage can that is
Yeah.
electrolytes that you know you need that before flight. Like
Yeah.
that's the difference between, the can and the sachet. A can
Yeah.
is just it's just got something different about it. It's such a
100%.
unique experience.
And I do think that like the brand that we've built as well, it makes a big impact. You know, obviously we've spoken about this, but we could. How do I break this down? Brand is super. I don't know how to say this without sounding a bit dumb, really, but brand is just super important to us. Like we see that we have proper loyalists. Like how many other drinks brands do you see where people are like getting one and they're excited to put a picture of it on the story? What I mean? It's almost like Ross calls it like $2 luxury, and it kind of is. It's one of those things. It's almost like a fashion item. It's almost like an if you know you know kind of thing. We hope that and eventually everyone knows about it, but um, yeah, I can't remember where I was going with that then.
Yeah, brand is important though because I think like that's something I've noticed even when we started working together and probably the evolution of Cadence Online has been it was we talked you mentioned this earlier but it was very aesthetic first. It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
it was very much it was luxury but
yeah,
you can't go too far into luxury
yeah.
without tapping into conversion and like how do you struggle manage that design? So that's probably been a big thing for you as well.
There is just like a trade-off each way, right? I mean, like with the sachets, for example, I have no doubt in my mind that we could scale it up rapidly with just like, you know, all lo-fi ads. We could work with absolutely anyone we could work with anyone to do our UGC. We could get pump volume into the account, take learnings very quick and scale it up rapidly. But I think that's the difference between, a lot of these brands where they are essentially a meta brand in a way, where, if one day they turn the ads off, they don't have a brand, they've got a meta scaled company. Where if
Yeah.
they turn the ads off, there's no true loyalists. You'd be all right for a while if you run a subscription business, but then, ultimately it could die out. And like I said, I think what we're trying to really build here is this legacy brand and longevity where, if we maintain the premium look and feel, the desirable nature of it, like the aspiration in who we work with and stuff. Yes, we might need to find different ways to doing it than like the traditional ways that people do scale on Meta with just like frankly ads that look like shit. But yeah, we're just trying to build something great. You know what I mean? Trying to build a great brand, a great business. Not necessarily the fastest growth business. Obviously, we want to grow fast, but
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, it's trying to find that balance for sure. Like,
exactly.
I mean, that it's also, I mean, we could string off that in a few ways. Like, one of the biggest things we've obviously doubled down on is like subscriptions,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Obviously we know how high that subscription take rate is, but what do you think that's a balance of? I know you've been putting this out in social media a bit, but obviously you basically just said it. You've literal like brand maximists who are obsessed with Cadence,
Yeah,
and I can easily say I was one of them. And
yeah,
it's just because it's a beverage that you align with. But
yeah.
in terms of that, I suppose if we talk more D2C, what's some of the biggest sort of leverage points you've seen with the subscription kind of take rate,
Yeah.
so that other brands can kind of learn from that?
Yeah. Yeah, I know we've kind of, I mean, since we've been working with each other, we've adjusted the offer quite a few times. You know what I mean? We've played around with gifts on order three, gifts on order two, gifts with order two and three. We've upped the first order discount, and all those things did have like an incremental difference. I'd say the biggest one, honestly, is the merch, like the cap. And it's something that I saw. It's something that I saw when I was at Represent. Actually, when I joined Represent, the owners club had really just started to kick off.
Yeah.
The thing that kicked it off was almost the scarcity of it. Obviously now it's everywhere. If you go on the website, it's always going to be on the site. But that was back when they were just doing limited drops of it, and it was those limited drops that ultimately blew it up because it just created the hype around it. And then it got to a point where demand was so high they could make sure that supply was always there, and it was just like it's a huge part of the business. So I kind of wanted to do that really with the cap, and not necessarily stick it on, sell a load at 30 quid and then take them off and say they went out of stock, but create the scarcity around it where there's only one way you can get it, and that will be with subscription. We tested it ultimately over Black Friday, and we saw, we had a
Yeah.
fantastic Black Friday, and then it just got to a point where it's like, okay, so why are we not just doubling down on this and just having it on all the time? And then it's really something we kind of rolled out to other things as well, like now the sports towel as well. You can only get that on your third month of subscription, so really the number of people who get those will be even less. Um,
Like exclusivity, like they're
yeah, it's just
exclusive,
it's your exclusivity. And now what's funny now. If I go out for a run in Manchester, I can't go out without seeing someone wearing a Cadence cap, and it's a pretty cool feeling knowing that like that person is a subscriber. You know what I mean? They've not just
Yeah.
bought us, like they are actually bought into us. Um, but it's something that will continue to build. You know what I mean? We'll keep bringing in these limited items that you can only access with subscription. You might not even get it as like a gift on month one, two, and three or whatever. It might be an item which is just for sale. It is for sale, but it's only for sale to subscribers. And ultimately, we just want to keep building value. I think another big one actually, which I think has impacted our retention a little bit more when we look at the cohort analysis of, say, November with the Black Friday cohort and then January with the cohort just gone. Like even the month one, like second month, but technically kind of month one retention on that is kind of night and day. And the only extra thing we added between those 2 months was the fuel guide, the digital fuel guide. So we got Matt Jones, who's our head of nutrition. He's also head of nutrition at the Boston Celtics and the UAE Football Association. So very well placed to be writing about
Oh,
all
smart.
sports nutrition and yeah, endurance and everything really. He put together. He's put a lot of them together now, to be fair. But the one we give out is the marathon fuel guide and then the half marathon fuel guide. It's essentially 30 plus pages written by him, and it's just educating the customer on essentially if they're running a marathon or if they're running a half marathon, which we know is a large segment of our consumers. I think it's like 88% of them say that they run regularly. Um, we know that that'll be of value to them, and it does tell them how to use the entire ecosystem of Cadence products, not necessarily the one that they've just got. So when we look at kind of, I guess, in a way, almost like a passive cross sell in a way, say
Yeah.
someone buys the core sachet, they'll get the digital fuel guide. And it'll tell them how to use the core sachet and how to work that into their training, but then it'll also tell them why and how they should be using other products. So I do think that had a big impact on just like the amount of value people feel like they're getting, and that's at the end of the day, that's a free delivery, right? It's just a digital fuel
Yeah.
guide inbox. Like it doesn't cost us anything in cogs. Like it's an easy value add that probably anyone can do if they're in any kind of specific space.
Yeah, I think the biggest learnings from that brands need to take is like free gifts that are low cogs, if
Yeah,
not free,
yeah,
technically, just using your team's power and knowledge
yeah,
is like one of the biggest value adds you should have. And it's all about value perception. You know, we talk about
yeah,
this all the time. Like your offer is just genuinely all about value perception.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
imagine you just saying subscribe to Cadence or subscribe to Cadence and get all
Yeah,
of these things over the next 4 months. You know, it's a
yeah, yeah,
completely different thing. But in terms of that, then, you know, you've obviously started to pump out a ton of ads.
yeah,
I think when we started working together,
yeah.
there's very limited ads, all
Yeah,
aesthetic, very cool, very like, you know, on brand, you could say. But since you brought, you know, a new team member on board, I think I was checking the other day, there's like 1,400 ads in Ads Manager or something,
yeah,
or the ads library, something wild. So
yeah.
what's been the biggest learning from there, obviously, and chat us through that.
Yeah, so I mean, like you kind of touched on before, it was very honestly, it was like a stretch on resource thing. We have an internal designer, but you know, for quite a while, he's been, like I kind of mentioned earlier, rebuilding our whole packaging system. So it was like we were getting, probably 10 to 20 ads in once every 2 weeks. So we just weren't hitting the volume where, we could get the volume in to the point where we were getting sufficient learnings, and there was no real testing process there. Partially again because of the volume, like there was not enough volume to really test different concepts. And if there was, it was just taking much longer.
Yeah.
Jack's honestly been like such a game changer for us. Like, ultimately the first thing he did when he came on was, I mean, he texted me at 9 a.m. on his first day saying he'd rebuilt the ad account. And then, like, second day, he's messaging me saying, can we hire this designer? And yeah, now it's like a case of we're getting new ads on every day. And, he's really pushing the boat out when it comes to not just looking at other brands and looking what ads they're doing and ripping them. He really thinks about why they're working, like what impact are they having on the audience essentially, and you look through our ad account now, and some of the stuff you kind of first look at it and think, what the hell is that? Not in a bad way, but I think you might remember the second heart ones, for example.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the heart in the leg. If you go in our ads library, you'll see it. But it's
It's a
you
lot more direct response. Like it's very much direct response now, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We're just testing so many different concepts, and like there are ones in there where it's like you do look at it and kind of think like, what is that? But then that's also kind of the point of it, where we're getting the thumb stop rate, we're getting the click through because people are really trying to digest what we're saying. And Yeah, like I said, I think it's really like it's a volume thing, but then it's also just like a real sniper focus on what are we trying to achieve with this ad? What are we trying to invoke? We obviously took our customer survey towards the back end of last year, where
Yeah.
we got the learnings on the different personas as well, and that's especially important for us when we start to look at like who we really try and speak to, because as you know, we're super dialed in on running and endurance sport, and that means we can't do this thing where we're trying to appeal to everyone. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is appeal to the elite, and then off the back of that downstream, everyone else sees it and thinks, okay, if this works for the elite athletes, then it'll work with me. You know what I mean? You've got Nike Alpha Fly, for example, £300 pair of running shoes, probably don't really make a difference for 99% of people. Yet if you go to your local run club on a Wednesday night, you'll probably see 4 or 5 pairs of them. You know what I mean? That's who we're trying
Yeah.
to really optimize for. So because we are kind of pretty tight in who we're targeting, it means that within that segment of people, we have to be super dialed on those personas within that, whether it
Yeah.
is the high performance athlete, whether it is, the more kind of product explorer, whether it is the kind of daily optimizer. And ultimately we build everything to kind of resonate with these audiences.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Like the biggest learnings, and we say this to every brand, is like you've got to ask your customers questions. Like
Yeah,
we always say it's what they say, what they see, what they click. Like ask them questions, understand why are you buying? Like what do you do in your day to
yeah,
day? Like if you get to know them more, it'll then fuel your actual decisions. And as you said, you're not copying other people all the time. You're thinking about your own cohort, and as
yeah,
you mentioned there as well, like different personas, not everyone needs to see the same ads, see the same funnel, the same
yeah,
PDPs. And
yeah,
we've all probably been talking about this for a long time, but it was until you brought him on that things just changed dramatically, and then our funnels and things aligned together. So
yeah,
it's been like a big shift in the brand I've seen
yeah,
as well. But I also known that like you were in Represent before. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? How have you seen kind of the difference in, I suppose, those two types of brands? You were obviously more on the SEO side, weren't you, in
yeah,
Represent? And
yeah, yeah.
then you're
Sorry.
now head of marketing. So
Yeah,
what do you kind of see the differences between the two brands or even the similarities?
yeah, yeah. So when I joined Represent, there was 30 of us. I think they
Was
just
there?
yeah,
Jesus.
yeah. So there was 30 of us in the office. I think they just done their first 20 mil a year. And then when I left, there was 140 in the office, and they were just touching on 100 mil. So yeah, it kind of got a. I think I got my first real sense of like what scaling up like heavily looks like. Previous to that, I was at My Protein, which I would say at this point is a legacy brand in that sports supplement space, and
Yeah.
obviously they grow, but like they don't grow to that extent where you're pretty much doubling up every year. Um, I mean, yeah, to be honest with you, my time at Represent was unbelievable. I was brought in with 18 months SEO experience and asked to kind of just kick things off on SEO and like just get them started with it. And yeah, I think non-brand organic traffic over the 3 years I was there increased by something crazy like 4,000%. Um, so yeah, it was a really interesting time because I mean, it changed as well, right? Like when I was first there, it did feel like a startup. Like we were in like a little warehouse office. Everyone had their own big table, and like everyone was still kind of scrappy and doing like quite a lot of different things. By the time I left, it was very, very compartmentalized to the point where you're in your role and that's ultimately all you do. Um, and that's been the biggest difference really between being at Represent and being at Cadence is, when I started at Cadence, I guess when I started helping at Cadence, there was basically no employees. So I was kind of doing everything, built the site, and was just handling all the marketing um, with essentially no team. As the team started to get built out, it started to get built out very heavily in brand. So my team for a long time was myself, two guys on partnerships, and then two content guys, one shooter, one designer. So when you look at that, it's so brand heavy, right? And like ultimately, I guess the performance marketing channels were all kind of just handled by me, and it was just like, one moment I'm writing a caption for an Instagram post, next moment I'm briefing ads, next moment I'm, you know, rebuilding
Making the
stuff.
website or
Like,
something.
yeah, exactly. It was just kind of everything.
Yeah.
And then it did kind of get to the end of last year where, I think it was about a month before Black Friday, and I was like, right, we've got these retail launches coming up. We've got Black Friday a month away. Like, I need to hire some people. So that's why we dug into influencer ads and then social shortly following that. But yeah, I mean, like ultimately, still we're all doing a lot of things within the team. The things that I kind of mentioned earlier about kind of everything I was doing, I'm still involved in, but it is more from a oversight perspective. It's great having these honestly true specialists in what they do. I can guide them and like push them and give them deadlines on things, and ultimately, I guess you could call it kind of like pushing your chess pieces around the chessboard in a way. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's great. I wake up every morning knowing that you know today's a day where there's going to be pretty high impacts, and I feel like you don't really get that a lot of businesses unless they're in that kind of early startup stage.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely the biggest thing I've seen. And the biggest constraint we see within clients we have or brands we've worked with is the fact that they just don't hire the right roles or they don't have the right people in certain areas. And
Yeah,
the biggest thing I've definitely seen with you guys is just like Ross and you and whoever else is involved in that decision making has just went and got the best people possible
yeah,
to be in that role. And every single time someone new has come into the partnership and we've been on calls with them,
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
completely more aligned strategy as well. I feel like everyone has their own role. Everyone chips in. Like even we
yeah,
give opinions on
exactly.
whatever it is, but everyone chips in with knowledge. And
Yeah,
I always say it like if you four or five people, all experts, and they all give opinions, you'll pull out
yeah,
the best ones and you'll get the best
yeah,
end result, do you know? And
exactly.
that's the thing I've seen.
100%. And even working with you guys, like, really do see Kirsty as like part of our team, really. Obviously, she's on your team, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and again, like, even though she doesn't necessarily, she's not coming on marketing calls with the rest of the brand team, for example, I feel like we do have very, candid conversations and discussions about, like, with myself, Kirsty, Jack, all kind of feeding in on what the end goal is and how we're going to get there. So Ross
Yeah, and
kind of
that's
describes
that's
it.
it.
Yeah, I was just going to say Ross kind of describes it in a way where, at the start of any business, you do need the generalist. And I guess I am kind of a generalist in my team, but then ultimately to achieve true scale, you need to hire like true spikes. So like people who are the best at what they do. And, ultimately, like when I was hiring the people in my team, I was pretty much given don't want to say like a ceilingless sandbox, but that makes zero sense. But the
Yeah,
really,
not you're just given you're going told to get the best people pretty
yeah,
much.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like, when it came to like a constraint on pay and things like that, like it almost wasn't an issue. I was just told to get the people who are going to get us to where we need to be. And you look at kind of the pedigree of the people that we've hired. Like we've got Sam on social, previously at C4, Dean on influencer agency background, but worked with the best to scale with influencer like Olipop in the US, Magic Spoon in the US. Um, and then Jack, who obviously again agency background, but what I loved about Jack is like that was kind of the one role where I was very wary about who I was interviewing. There's a lot of people that can come on an interview and tell me, oh yeah, I've got a monthly budget of 300 grand a month. Like, what I mean, I'm used to handling those budgets. And it's like, okay, so what was the business spending when you joined, and like what are they spending now? And if there isn't a high discrepancy between those two numbers, then you're probably not the person for me. What I loved about Jack is that he's seen what scaling to greatness really looks like and kind of taking an account from 0 to 1. Um, so yeah, that's why we hired him essentially.
Yeah. I know it's so interesting though, and that's where we try to be different in this, we want to kind of be a part of that team. And I
Yeah,
think that's agencies have to try and do that. You have to try and be part of the brand team and actually care. And
yeah,
if you care and you want to be part of their growth, that's as good as being in the team, in my opinion. That's why
yeah.
I love this.
Honestly, I remember when we first spoke. And
And a Twitter DM.
yeah, a Twitter DM, and like you told me you were a fan of the brand. I checked whether you were a customer, and I think you had a subscription on like our Ultimate Hydration System or something, and like that goes a hell of a long way. You know what I mean? Like you really want someone who's actually bought into where you are now and like what the future looks like and that vision. So yeah,
Exactly, exactly. And if any brands are out there, you want to get. I honestly ask every client we work with, I'm like, send me your product. Like, I have your first can here. I have
yeah.
your first can. I have it's still with the liquid in it, the
Uh,
little first one.
I should have been to in 10 years.
So like, I think you've got to really see it because I think when you see it and you try it, you really get
Yeah,
a sense of what the brand's trying to achieve. And
yeah,
also part of that's been Ross's YouTubes, Ross, and that's probably just what you were talking about there. The biggest thing I've noticed is how you guys are operating the business as a brand is it's all it's like very focused into the future of like what are you trying to achieve, and
hmm,
then how does what we're about to do now get towards that. And even those hires, they're going to get you there. It might be like some short-term pain in terms of
yeah,
cost, but
Yeah,
ever since you brought these new people on, and we were on just before them, I think,
yeah,
it's just went up and to the right,
yeah, yeah, exactly.
and
Ex-
that's been the biggest lesson. But so for this year, what's kind of the goals for Cadence then? What are you trying to aim for? You can kind of split that
Yeah,
between D2C and retail, I guess.
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, total growth, we're looking at like 500% year on year, which is pretty big.
Huge.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, retail is obviously a big one. Like I said, we've just launched Target and Holland and Barrett. Next big one for us, I don't know if it's really been announced yet, but will be Walmart next month, which is
Huge.
obviously, biggest retailer in the world. I mean, ultimately, there's been, honestly, right now, there's probably a new retailer coming on every 2 days right now. Get a message from Ross with a new store list. So, um, yeah, and I think, like I said, I look a lot to brands like Breeze, who again have killed it in D2C, and I think we can do that, and I think ultimately it's this kind of interplay between retail and D2C, which is going to get us there. I think to be quite frank, like when I first started at Cadence, I had virtually no experience in retail, and like to an extent, I kind of looked at it as like they're kind of two separate things of like, oh yeah, retail's taken away from your D2C sales, or like if someone in D2C has a subscription to your site, it means that they're probably not going to walk into a Walmart and pick your product up because they've got it at home. But I guess as I've kind of like grown and started to not just even see how it plays out, but also kind of look into ways that we can kind of use them concurrently. Um, the way we really see it is ultimately retail drives trial. Like, getting a 12 pack off a website, if you've not tried the drink before, is actually a pretty big commitment. Getting them on a subscription is an even bigger commitment. So, as we build distribution, um, what we're kind of hoping is, people try the drink and then ultimately come to our site for a subscription. Because
Yeah.
but yeah, like I said, they kind of work. They work in each other's favor because if we launched Target a month ago, or I guess it went live about a month ago. We didn't officially launch it until about a week and a half ago. If we didn't have a D2C business, if we didn't have a vast email list, if we didn't have an SMS database, like we'd kind of be struggling to drive people into stores.
Off. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
what essentially the D2C side gives us is this extremely loyal community of people who, like I said, I know we have a extremely loyal community who, if we tell them go and pick up a can at your Target today, they'll go and pick up a can at the Target. You know what I mean? And they'll post a picture of
Yeah.
the story and they'll tag Target,
Yeah.
tag Cadence in it, and you know what I mean, just to hope to get a reshare. So we can drive our community and our customers into stores to get those initial velocities, which essentially, you know, there's a thing called spins in the US where essentially anyone can look at how a brand is doing in a retailer. So like, other retailers see those initial velocities and think, fuck, I need to get on a piece of this as well. And then it
Yeah.
opens up distribution. And then we are doing things to then, get those people who've maybe not really seen us before, but tried us have tried us from a store, to get those back into this D2C ecosystem and get them onto a subscription. One of the things that we've done is partner with a company called Aisle. Um, so what essentially Aisle is, we can run meta ads on it. It'll take people to a page on our site, and it basically allows us to run our own promos. Just to give you a bit of background, like ultimately promo is probably your best way to get people to buy in a shop. Like when you go into a store and see, a drink that should be £1.70 and they've reduced it to £1, like that's not the retailer just discounting and taking a hit. That is the brand paying for that promo. And promos can be quite hard to get. In a way, you kind of need to prove yourself sometimes in order to access them with the retailer. Um,
So interesting.
so like to launch into Target, we're priced at 279. We can't go to Target and say like put us on promo right away. You know what I mean? So we basically put on our own promo. So we have Aisle, we have a landing page, store locator on the landing page,
Yeah.
and essentially it's set up so that You put your phone number in, you put your email address in, they'll text you, and then all you need to do is send back a picture of your receipt having bought two Cadence cans, and within an hour they'll Venmo or PayPal you back the value of one can. So you're essentially doing buy one get one free on your own terms
Unreal.
without having to deal with the retailer at all.
Yeah.
And we're capturing people who aren't already in our ecosystem through meta ads with that. They're buying the cans in the store. They're buying two cans in the store. So they're not just buying one. So you're essentially doubling up your velocity straight away. But then we've also got their email and we've got their SMS and we've got their phone number. So then all those people get straight away plugged back into our welcome flow within the website. And then within the aisle flow, so the SMS thing, once they submit, they can do the trial again. So they can do the buy one get one free again. So they do that again, and then they get plugged into coming to our site again through that method to subscribe, and they get prompted to subscribe. So, like I said, it's kind of a this.
Like one big funnel. It's like
Yeah,
one massive funnel. Like,
it is one big funnel, and the best brand awareness you can get is being in every single fridge in the US and the UK. Like that's the big. You can spend as much money as you want on meta ads, and you'll always be paying for those views. Whereas if you get on shelf, like what's the footfall of your local Tesco in a day? You know what I mean? Then you extrapolate that across every single store in the UK, every single store in the US, and it really is your best brand awareness. So
yeah, yeah, it's wild. Like, remember I sent you, I was in a coffee shop and I
yeah,
was holding it with my laptop, and the guy was like, "Oh, is that Cadence?" And
yeah,
it was so random. Like, and that's in my town here in Ireland. Like, so
yeah,
it's exactly what you just said. But I think the maddest thing to me is how much all of this is just one huge funnel. But
really
you
is.
just said it there. That's offer. Do you know? Like, I think the biggest brands in the world, no matter how good you are, there's obviously the conglomerates, like, and Nike doesn't have to run an offer, or, the brands that are absolutely huge. But if you're a brand in e-commerce, I also always say to our team, there's two things that are going to scale you. It's you have to have the product, you have to have the product market fit. So excluding that, but the things we can control is offer and angles. And
Yeah,
they're the two things that you've mentioned basically continuously throughout all of this is no matter even if it's in retail, offer matters. But even the angle, because I
yeah,
seen Ross has been putting up stories of the different types of setup you have in the retail, and you're
mm,
even changing up the wording and changing up the visual of how those stands are looking. So
yeah.
it's all messaging and
That's it.
branding. Like,
Honestly, like retail is very similar to D2C in a way. Every retailer has a different customer. The GNC customer is very different from the vitamin shop customer. The GNC customer is 70% male and goes to the gym. The target customer is 70% female and mostly under 25. So, when you're appealing to those two demographics, like there's different things that matter, you know what I mean? With the GNC customer, we are telling them about the 500 milligrams of sodium, and we're telling them about the benefits of that with, essentially replacing what you sweat out as you work out. To the target customer, it's very different. Realistically, that girl probably cares about the fact that it's zero sugar, zero artificial flavors, more so than anything else. And then when you look at Walmart, the customer there is, middle America. So like not necessarily your New York City guy or your LA guy. You know, it's your family in Kansas. You know what I mean? And you've got to appeal to them. So again, it's a different messaging to them. So whether it's with your brand awareness ads, whether it's your geolocated ads, whether it's your influencers, you've got to bear all that in mind in who you're trying to appeal to. And like you said, the kind of the display units in store as well. Um, yeah, you're speaking to different people, so you've got to be direct response with with them and with what matters.
uh, it's wild. It's wild. It's literally so similar. But I suppose like the thing I always look at it is like the biggest thing for me is like flavor. Do you know, like it you changing the new branding has it looks like you can see the flavor, if that makes sense. Like, more. I
Mm,
always felt like looking at the can, you never knew that it said no caffeine, zero sugar, hydration, complete electrolytes. It was nearly as if people were you were hiding that.
yeah,
And that and like the flavor, I
yeah,
think, has been the two biggest changes. And if you're looking at any brand, even on the website, we've seen this,
yeah,
like, not explaining or telling people what they need to read is just like that's sometimes what brands just miss out. They
yeah.
forget to tell people what the product is and what it does for them.
Yeah, yeah. No, exactly. And you know what? Like, obviously, we've not A/B tested having old branding on versus new branding on the website, but I have no doubts in my mind that it's made a difference because it just hits you as soon as you land, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we already done the little flavor pills, so
Yeah.
there's a little edge to that as well already. But I suppose that kind of, you mentioned something there which was like very much on brand, people seeing you. How do you think the organic side of the brand has kind of impacted then sales? So you've obviously got like organic socials, you brought on like a head of social, and
Yeah.
you also have a lot of events and pop-ups now. You done one in Dubai, you done one in, you're doing run clubs. Like how do you think that's kind of like helped the culture of the brand and the sales?
Yeah. Yeah, I think community is like the biggest, honestly, like the biggest buzzword there is in marketing right now. I would actually argue that Represent was one of the like front runners with it. I remember we did our first 247 run in Manchester. We had a pop up, and we put out comms like a couple of days before, meet 7 a.m. outside Selfridges, and 300 people turned up. Uh, and I think it's what's funny is like after that I was looking at 247 branded impressions and clicks on organic. And we saw, I think for the following week, we saw like a 600% increase in 247 clicks to the website. What was really interesting was that specifically actually impacted the US more than it did the UK, and the run was in Manchester. So we had that run, um, loads of people obviously creating content around it, and then that just kind of that really really started to ramp things up for us. Um, Obviously, I think events which you can have social off the back of it, you can invite influencers to it. It is good for an awareness play, but I think the real benefit of it is really an LTV play. Make it like putting on these in real life events, having Ross come down, having these kind of figureheads now, a bit like Herc, for example, who's he's one of our athletes, but he's also on my team as an employee. And honestly, the guy's an absolute killer on the business front. Like he's been a game changer for the business as well. But having these people come down to the events and like meet people that have been watching on YouTube, on Instagram, whatever, like, and making them ultimately just feel part of the brand. Like we don't actually do a lot of our own. Um, we don't really do a lot of our own events. What we do tend to do is fuel a lot of other people's events,
Yeah,
doing our own thing.
collabs, yeah.
Yeah, doing our own thing. We might put on a run club, and max will have 200 people turn up, and it'll impact those 200 people there, and it'll stretch our resource to put it on. It'll obviously cost money to put it on, and having someone there as a representative who can educate on the product and whatever else, it is kind of like a big lift for a reasonably low ROI. So what we tend to do more of is fueling other people's run clubs. So we take London Marathon for example coming up, mate. We will be everywhere. Like we're not really doing our. I mean, we are actually doing our own thing. I'll tell you a little bit about that after. Um, but yeah, the goal is to just be that hydration partner to everyone that ultimately like has any kind of, I guess, sway within the actual culture. What you tend to find is a lot of brands will just like suddenly switch on as soon as a marathon comes around, and you can tell because nobody posts about it, nobody turns up to their things, and
Yeah.
doesn't really have an impact. Whereas we partner with the communities who are like not just there on the day, but they're in the run up there throughout the year. They're like training on a track on a Wednesday night in the middle of winter, because ultimately they're the most bought in, not just runners, but they can be the most bought in customers. And yeah, like I said, I think it's made a very tangible difference to our LTV generally.
Yeah, yeah. I know it's been, I actually remember, I can't remember what it was, but I used to watch like George Heaton's YouTube and him putting on the represent run clubs
Yeah,
and seeing them all run through the streets, and then people are going like, "Who is that brand?" I was in Cape Town recently and seen, you've brands like Run and Lake Club is getting
yeah,
big over there, and they're bringing on then DJs, and everyone's in the same mindset. So it's one big like advertising sort of
yeah,
event. But I guess it's like when I tried the product for the first time, it was from watching George and Ross launch the brand on the YouTube video, and then you buy it and you see someone and you there is a connection there.
Yeah,
So it is a massive, massive part of keeping brands or keeping customers, might
yeah,
I say, for
yeah,
sure. But I guess then the last thing for me is I always love asking this question is like, what's one thing you wish you'd done sooner in D2C, and what's one thing you wish you'd done sooner in retail? So this can be product packaging, marketing, whatever it is, just one thing that you think you wish you kind of knew back when you first joined.
yeah. I wish we brought Jack in sooner on the ad side.
I thought you were
Um,
gonna say that, to be fair.
no, 100.
So did I, to be fair.
Yeah, 100%. Like, it's one of those where we were definitely scaling, but like I said, I think I was just trying to handle and have control of too many things. Um, you know, like I said, it was almost like we didn't have anyone on influence, we didn't have anyone on ads. Obviously for a long time, it was just me on the website. Um, and then, obviously we brought you guys on. I kind of figured to really maximize what you guys are doing, we just need to have someone who can be bringing that level and quality of traffic to the website that we're looking for.
Yeah,
Equally, we don't want everyone coming to the website, right? Because you can have the wrong traffic come,
yeah,
and I think having that having that level of we're bringing people to the site who are ready to convert, who are to a degree already bought in, and then ultimately you guys like the cherry on top, which just refine everything to a point where we get them to convert. So uh,
yeah. It's
yeah,
probably a big learning for everyone though. That is even as a business owner, like giving away control is something
yeah,
everyone has to learn, but to the right people. But it's
exactly.
best to have a touch on it because then you actually know what needs to be done better than what you were doing.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's sick. And then in terms of retail, what's one thing you wish done sooner in retail?
yeah. I think the obvious, there's kind of two ones to this. So the obvious one I think is the packaging. I think everyone in the business would say that. Um, I think the next biggest one will be influencer, like getting in the influencer game sooner. We spent a long time as a brand working with, top athletes, who top athletes are pretty expensive and they're great as a positioning play, you know what I mean? Like, but they do not convert at all. I can tell you that.
No.
They've got loyal audiences who will like ultimately want to take what they take. But realistically, you look at athletics, for example, to most people, they only really care about the athletes in athletics once every 4 years when the Olympics rolls around. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was
Yeah.
great for our like core demographic. But then like as we're looking to be the world's biggest hydration business, it just wasn't doing it for us. So yeah, I think kind of opening that range up a little bit and like working with, specifically, I think when we brought Dean on last year, we were about a month out from New York City Marathon. So straight away we just got on a massive gifting push. Pretty much like anyone on TikTok who was documenting their journey to New York City Marathon. Not anyone, obviously. I think we gifted to about 200 people. Um, we sent them product, and I think we hit like an 80% post rate on that. So, we got a large amount of visibility on our product on the run up to New York City Marathon. And then I wasn't actually there at the time, but I kind of heard that it seemed like we were everywhere. You know what I mean? Because all people had seen on TikTok about how people are fueling for New York was people were fueling Cadence. And I think, yeah, when we look at retail, especially at the brands that have had a lot of success in retail, the likes of Bloom, Olipop, Poppy, like they all scaled those channels with influencer. And it wasn't necessarily you one big person who's got 6 million followers. It was volume. It was volume of influencers. I always say to Dean, like I really would rather have 500 people post that get 1,000 to 1,000 2,000 views on each post, and then just have it so that when people go on TikTok, like they see one person have it, another person have it, another person have it. I'd rather have that than just have one big heavy hitter who hits one viral video. And like, yeah, it gets the reach, but people aren't getting repeatedly hit by it. In a way, it's kind of an all smoke and mirrors kind of thing with influencer. Like, you're kind of giving the impression that, everyone is using your product. So, uh,
Yeah, it's an attention economy. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
100%.
we worked with one of the biggest boxers in the world,
Yeah.
and they launched a brand. And trust me when I say, like, these people do not get the sales or the attention that you think they would get if they launched a product. And I think that's what, like, what Ross, George, all of these people, like Dom Lacavone, all these people that are taking the attention economy properly can actually
Mhm.
build properly sustainable brands because they're doing it in the right way. And it comes back to your thing about influencers. You're getting the right eyes on it because they're creating the content a certain way. So, I mean, this has been super valuable, Matty. I appreciate you coming on. On that note, we'll call it there. This is
Awesome.
obviously going to be more episodes coming out every so often. I'm not going to give a time schedule, but every couple of weeks we'll be releasing more episodes with some marketers, brand owners, so brands can take away nuggets and learning. So, Molly, thank you so much for jumping on.
Yeah, sure.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
All
great.
right, guys. Thanks so much for listening. If you can like, comment, subscribe, and let us know who you want on next. Peace.